Ready?
Good evening, Ty. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, but especially thank you for this trilogy that has kept us company throughout these years. Here, we in Cinema Beltrade have screened all the previous chapters with great pleasures, and now we are happy to have Maxine. The audience is going to see the movie after our talk. And I'm Francesco, and I'm here just to break the ice, just make a few questions to open the dance, and then I hope that the audience is going to share with you their thoughts and maybe their questions. How are you? I know that you're really busy during those days for the promotion of the movie.
Yeah, this is the end, so it's a bit bittersweet because for the last almost 5 years, all I've been doing is working on these three movies all day, every day, and this is literally Italy is the last stop of the last thing to be done on any of these movies. So this is probably the last Q&A I'll ever do for this trilogy, at least for the initial run of them. So it is a bittersweet feeling.
Ok, I'm going to ask if anyone need translation, just 1 minute. Ho chiesto prima, ma richiedo, qualcuno ha bisogno della traduzione? Che eventualmente faccio al volo? Perfetto, no. Perfect, there's no need of translation. And in fact, my first question was about this. We as spectators have witnessed this trilogy going through different permutation transformations, always unexpected, but always with the same vitalic energy to it. So it's really maybe a personal question. Which was the flame, the sparkle that ignited you to keep working for almost 5 years to a project that got bigger and bigger throughout, if I'm correct, almost 5 years in the making?
I don't really know. I mean, it started as I wrote X because I hadn't made a horror movie in 10 years and I felt like it was time to do that again. And so I wrote that movie, not thinking it would be a trilogy. And once we made that movie and we went to New Zealand to make it because of COVID, and that's what kind of spawned Pearl happening because we were trying to stay in New Zealand and keep making movies because we were the only people on Earth making movies. And I just felt like it would be such a shame to stop doing that when we were so lucky to be there. And that's how it became, a sequel. And I sort of said to A24, if these work, we should make a third one. And really, it just kind of became this ongoing thing to just try to keep it going. And so, in retrospect, it's a very strange 5 years that I've had. But during it, it was really just about what gets the next thing done, like what gets X made, what gets X finished, what gets Pearl made, what gets Pearl finished, what gets Maxine. And so, I really haven't had any time to reflect on it. So it's been it's certainly been the hardest work I've done in a big chunk of my life, but it's been it's been very rewarding and to be here. I mean, I'm in Rome right now, but to still be here in Italy talking to you on Zoom is pretty surreal.
And I was thinking that right now, today, mainstream cinema is really dominated by franchises. And often those franchises are based on reboot, remakes, and stuff like that. And in that context, you did two really great things at a time. Because first of all, you did a new franchise, a brand new franchise. And at the same time, you did a franchise that chapter after chapter still change its shape, its form, its style completely. So I'd like, is it important for you in the context of today's cinema to upset expectations, to run away of expectation and to challenge the taste of the audience?
I think a little bit. I think for me personally, it's I don't really want to repeat myself, and I tend to when I'm making something think, have I seen this before? And it's okay if you've seen something like it before, but I always try to find a new like perspective, my own perspective on it. So it's more in trying to just keep myself surprised and sort of and interested. And then I hope that if that works for me, that will work for an audience. But yeah, it's funny to think that this is a franchise. I mean, I realize that, but it's at the same time, it just started as like a little passion project movie, and now it's become these three movies, and them all being different has been for me when I wrote X, a big reason to do it was for like the craft of the filmmaking to be on display and to then do Pearl and have a different type of crafted filmmaking on display, and then to finish that here in Maxine, that's been what's really satisfying to me, just specifically as a director, is to be able to lean into these sort of styles of different decades and really have something that's like cinematic and theatrical for audiences to go see, because that's the kind of movies that I love.
And you were referring right now to the meta topic that underlines throughout all the films, especially in X, I'd like to point. And in fact, we see people that are doing movies, that love movies, that are trying to get into the movie business. And at the same time, you put at the center of it two main characters like Pearl and Maxine that got a lust for success and fame and want to be movie stars. And somehow it seems to me that you kind of went meta even there because you contributed to the success of Mia Goth and to her rise of fame as a contemporary movie star. So I'd like to know if her own path informed the movie, the project, and how it was to collaborate with her as an actress, but maybe much more I'd like to know as a screenwriter on Pearl.
I don't. I think in retrospect, the her path may look similar to the movies. At the time, I met her on Zoom like this about X to play the part of Maxine, and we had a very nice conversation. And she liked the movie. She understood the movie I was trying to make, and and she also had a real desire to be the lead role of a movie. I think she'd been in a lot of movies that she was proud of, but she hadn't really had the challenge to be the center focus of a movie, and she was very hungry for that. And coincidentally, I had written a movie about a character that wanted to do that. So it was like a perfect alignment because her in her personal life was very ready for a challenge like this. And so that aligned with the Maxine character. And then when I suggested that, what if she also played Pearl? She really leapt at that opportunity. And that was even more enticing for her because I think it was more of a something to sink her teeth into. And then when the idea of making Pearl, the second movie, came up, I had to ask her, I was like, will you stay in New Zealand if we make this other movie? Because there's no movie if you say no. And she was very excited to do that. And I said, well, since you're playing Pearl and I haven't written this yet, we should do this together because, you know, there is no movie without you. And so during the 2 week quarantine to get into New Zealand, we would sort of FaceTime like this. And I would write stuff and we'd bounce stuff off one another and we'd crank out a script. And so, and then from there, it's just the snowball kept rolling, and we just got to know each other better, and the collaboration got more, informed. And she really sort of once she started portraying Maxine and Pearl, the characters became hers, by that point. So for me, I was really kind of watching what she was doing and setting up guardrails and trying to nudge her into directions of the movie, but to really let her do her thing because she was having it was obvious they were like special performances even on set. So I didn't want to, interrupt too much of that.
Perfect. My last question, then I'm going to lend the mic to the audience, waiting for their questions. Talking specifically about Maxine, because it's the movie we are about to see. You are changed completely the setting, because from the farm in Texas, that was New Zealand, we are right now in Los Angeles. And I'd like to know how it was to rebuild the flavor of the 80s of Los Angeles in the 80s, and especially how much it was difficult to shoot in LA, because I know that it was a sort of a challenge for you.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do a movie of, if we had, let's say, 5 times the budget or something, it would not have been as challenging. But to do the scope that we were trying to do at a relatively small budget it was logistically really difficult. So the filming the scenes and things like that was kind of the same as far as any sort of challenge. But the logistics of trying to turn a very busy Los Angeles into the 1980s and stop everybody for limited their lives so that we can do that is pretty hard to wrangle. And so it was fun to do it because it's a decade that I like. And the first 2 movies are very contained, and we wanted the third movie to be this big bombastic Hollywood finale. So it really needed to be at all of these tourist spots, and that's just a lot to ask. But I think the art department did an amazing job, and the crew did an amazing job. So we got it done, but it was certainly challenging.
Perfect, thank you. So, is there anybody out there who wants to make a question, share their thoughts? Qualcuno vuole fare una domanda? Approfittate, un'occasione speciale. Se avete bisogno posso tradurre Here comes the first question from the audience.
We've talked about X and Pearl and MAXXXINE being very different movies in a lot of aspects. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the element that ties them together the most, that kind of defines the continuum between the three?
Well, besides the sort of central character and elements of the plot, the real like connective tissue for me was like cinema. I guess cinema in quotes, but how the characters are affected by cinema, both in the story and then in the style of the movie. So if in X, for instance, they're trying to make this low budget movie in a way to make themselves famous, and they're affected by the fact that they can make their own Hollywood wants nothing to do with them, but they can make their own film careers by doing it themselves. And that's a way that it's affecting them. And then stylistically, I'm kind of contributing to that with the style of filmmaking. And then in Pearl, she has a life she's unhappy with, and she's looking at the movies as the kind of like on a pedestal of what life could be if only she had that glamorous life, everything would be great. And so the style of the movie sort of reflects that. And then here in MAXXXINE, MAXXXINE is finally in Hollywood. She's finally in a form of the movie business, but maybe it's not enough. And so it becomes, what is it like to actually be in Hollywood? And then the movie style reflects that. So that connective tissue for me has always been how cinema is affecting the movies.
There's another question.
Hi, I just wanted to say first that I love your work and I loved Pearl. I was wondering what attracted you to Mia Goth as the lead, because as you said, she hadn't been in any titular roles. So I was wondering what made you choose her. I mean, she was obviously perfect, but I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I had seen her in pretty much everything, and I always thought she was great. And so when we met, I was like a fan, and I wanted to work with her, just generally speaking. And then we just had a really good conversation, and I think she really understood what the movie was. And you would think that that would be more common than it is. And so when you're trying to make a movie that is is a bit odd and a bit sort of unexpected. And certainly, if you're making a movie where a character plays two roles in it, you really need someone who sees the same movie in their head that you do, and someone that is really willing to give the amount of like effort that you are. I mean, for her to play those two roles in X, that's like 6 hours of makeup before a 12-hour shooting day, and then the next day is like you're just right back doing that again. And so to be able to take that challenge on and want to do it is very rare. And so, like I said before, she also had this desire to kind of prove herself in a similar way to MAXXXINE. So it really just, a lot of it you just get from meeting someone and you think like, oh, this person, will be a good fit together. But also there was all those elements that just perfectly aligned.
Looking for other questions. I get another one that is really simple and straight. Some months ago, we got here as our guest Luca Guadagnino, and he told us that you write a movie 3 different times on the page, on the film, and in the editing room. And I know that you are one of those directors that go through these different passages because you write, you shoot, and you even edit your own movies. So I'd like to know which one for you is the moment in the realizing of a work more difficult, more challenging, and maybe even more happier, more happy.
He's right. That is what you do. I always find that the one I like the most is the one I'm not doing. So writing, the upside of writing is there's nobody around. It's just you doing it by yourself. The downside is it's just you doing it by yourself. The upside of making the movie on set is that it's sort of collaborative and you're around lots of people and it's social and it's like really what you've been waiting for this whole time. The downside is it's very difficult and you don't have a lot of time and resources, and you're also like confronting all of your failures in real time, and you're exhausted and you're very excited to have that part behind you. And then the upside of editing is you have a lot of control over manipulating all the things that you did and making things that were not as good as they could have been better and things like that. The downside is you're also stuck with all of the things you should have done better. And so I find it all very traumatic. And so, for instance, right now I'm writing a movie and it's quite miserable. And I think that editing seems like a really great thing, or shooting a movie seems really great. But, next year when I'm making a movie, I will be thinking, oh, if only I was back writing a movie. So it's always a revolving door. But to his point, you are always, you have these opportunities to have the movie evolve and make it better with each step. And I think that's what leads to the best movie, is when you write something and then you sort of actualize it and then you refine it.
Perfect. There's a question from the audience.
Hi, I was wondering if there was someone, both real or fictional character, which inspired Pearl or Maxim. Thank you.
No, Maxine kind of came to me because I knew what the story of the movie was going to be, and I was trying to think of what the main character would be like, and I was just thinking about, typically in these type of movies, X specifically, historically speaking, normally the young people who are sort of liberated would go to the farm, and the old people would be very puritanical, and they would punish them for sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all of that. And I thought that the interesting way into a slasher movie today was to see that the old people were actually jealous and resentful of what the young people were doing. And so that made me think of like, well, then what kind of young person would an older person be jealous of? And then that comes into like, well, it would be a reflection of themselves and what they didn't get to do and things like that. And it sort of spawned from there. So it wasn't really based on a person as much as it was based on like I guess a feeling that would translate over the years.
Speaking for myself, when I watched X for the first time and then even the second time, I was really struck by the fact that those two old men were Pearl and Edward. I was somewhat taken aback by their tenderness. There was a sort of tenderness line throughout all their violence and their misery. I don't know if that was a point that you wanted to achieve with those two characters, or it's just my personal view.
Yeah, I mean they're in a bit of a sad situation, which I mean I think seems a bit absurd given the context of the movie. But yeah, I always thought of it as I wanted to sort of treat them aesthetically, sort of like monsters in a monster movie, but I didn't want their characters to reflect that. I didn't want them to be sort of these sort of two-dimensional just villains for no reason. I wanted you to kind of understand what they were up to. You might not agree with it, but you would at least know where they're coming from. And the same thing in Pearl, the movie Pearl. On paper, she's not a great person. But the movie doesn't really judge her. And so because you're on her side the whole movie, despite the bad things that she might do, you can't really vouch for them, but you can understand them.
Thank you. C'è qualche altra domanda da parte vostra? No? And speaking about Maxine, and I'm not going to spoil anything to the audience, but it seems to me that there's a theme that is also present in X and in Pearl that really maybe goes bombastic, as you were saying before in Maxine. That is the idea of a certain part of the society that really fear and somewhat really wants to punish the freedom of moral costumes and of sexual expression and liberty of younger and maybe more free person. I'd like to know if you think that this is a feeling that is going underline our society right now, and maybe that you try to reflect on it in your movies, or it's just my interpretation?
Well, in Maxine in particular, there's that literally is happening because in 1985 there was a lot of that going on in the States. But I think that always is the case. I think that it's relevant in the X, it's relevant in Pearl, it's relevant in Maxine. Now, like again, it's very specifically relevant in Maxine to the story, but people will always have these sort of moral outrages about what other people are up to. I don't think that will ever change. I think that's part of what has made the movies resonate with people. I think there are sort of two universal themes in the movies that people seem to have really connected to, which is one, this desire that if you have a certain life that you're unhappy with, that if only you had a different kind of life, all of your problems would go away. I think that's something that people can really relate to, and how difficult it would be to try to achieve a very different life, and how it's not uncommon that you would fail at doing that in Pearl's case. And that's a very scary thought. So I think the idea of like Maxine's drive is very relatable to people. And then I think just sort of the outward judgment of people. You know, the thing about these movies is that in all three of these movies, the characters do not behave like ideal citizens. You know, they have their flaws, but the movie doesn't really judge them for their flaws. The movie just kind of goes, this is the character of the movie you're going to hang out with, and for better or worse. And I think that people also, that has been refreshing to people to not feel like the judgment of like the my voice behind the movie making a judgment on the characters or a judgment about the characters, which is also like thematically relevant to the stories.
Last call maybe for questions from the audience. L'ultima chiamata direi per domande da parte vostra, quindi approfittatene. Se non ce ne sono, okay. I'm going to make just the last question, and I know that it's the question you probably have heard 1,000 times, so I'm sorry, but I have to ask it. Is it really the end of this journey with MAXXXINE?
Probably. You know, it's certainly not what I'm going to do next. I mean, I think that we made these three movies, and we're very proud of these movies, and I think we told a very closed loop story in some ways with Maxine and Pearl. And so to make another movie that that involves these characters, I wouldn't want to do it just to do it. I would want to have a really like very inspired reason to do it. But so maybe in like, I don't know, 20, 30 years or something, when Mia is much older and I'm much older and we have a different perspective on something, maybe there's a way into the story then. But for now, I think that we've left them at a good place.
It's always a matter of perspective.
Mhm.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. West, to be with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. Like I said, this is the last one, so thank you for coming out and seeing the movie. It's very surreal, and I'm very grateful for it to be. I mean, it's very strange. Like I'm in Rome talking to you in Milan. I mean, this is very. My life has gotten really crazy in the last 5 years, and so I'm very grateful for it. So thank you guys very much.
Enjoy the ride. Perfect. Thank you very much again. Hope to see you in the flesh one day.
Yes. Hope you like the movie. No problem. Okay. And then dinner in 15, right? That's when he's picking me up? Yes, perfect. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you love movies? Letterboxd is the perfect place to discover, explore, rate, review,